There is a $3 liquid sitting on the bottom shelf of grocery stores across America. No warning label, no age restriction, no prescription, no mechanic, no special tool you do not already own. And yet it can bring a completely dead car battery back to life in less than 36 hours. Not halfway, not for a few days, permanently. The United States military used this chemistry as far back as 1943. NASA engineers relied on the same principle for battery systems in spacecraft, where replacement was not even an option because the nearest auto parts store was 240 million miles away. Off-grid homesteaders in Alaska, Montana, and rural Appalachia have quietly used it for decades without buying replacement batteries. A retired electrical engineer in Idaho tested it on 600 dead batteries across an 11-year period and documented a 94% full recovery rate. Cost per battery, less than $3. And yet, the $48 billion automotive battery industry has spent the last 40 years making sure you never heard about it. This is not some internet hack. This is not a shortcut. This is old industrial chemistry, buried chemistry, chemistry that works. By the time this story is over, you will understand exactly how to use it, exactly why it works, and exactly why some of the biggest names in American auto manufacturing never wanted this in your hands. Because really, think about what that means. Stop buying batteries. You are about to find out why, for a staggering number of cases, you never had to. To understand the lie, you have to go somewhere most people never see. Inside a dead car battery. Not a diagram, not an animation. The actual electrochemical reality of what happens when a battery dies, and why every mechanic who told you it was finished was either uninformed or worse. A standard 12-volt automotive battery contains 6 internal cells. Inside each cell sits a stack of lead plates, alternating between lead dioxide and sponge lead, submerged in a sulfuric acid electrolyte solution. When the battery discharges, a chemical reaction spreads across the surface of those plates. Lead sulfate crystals begin to form. That part is normal. During recharging, those crystals are supposed to dissolve back into the electrolyte, and the plates are supposed to reset. But here is where the entire system turns against the consumer. If a battery sits discharged too long, if it goes through repeated deep discharge cycles, if it spends one winter forgotten in a cold garage without a maintainer, those lead sulfate crystals do not simply wait to be reversed. They harden, they calcify. They cling to the plate surface in a dense crystalline layer that a standard charger cannot break. That process has a name, sulfation. And sulfation is the real killer. Not cracked plates, not leaking acid, not simple adge. Sulfation. According to published data, often cited in battery research, sulfation accounts for roughly 80% of all lead-acid battery failures in consumer automotive use. 80%. That means 4 out of every 5 batteries people have replaced in their lives were not structurally destroyed. They were chemically clogged. Just sit with that for a moment. Every battery you paid $180 for, $220, $260. In countless cases, the casing was still intact. The plates were still intact. But the electrochemical reaction was being choked by a layer of crystallized lead sulfate. The battery was not truly dead, it was blocked. And the reversal? The reversal costs less than a box of cereal. The answer is magnesium sulfate. Most people know it by the name Epsom salt. It sits in the health and beauty aisle at Walmart, CVS, Target, Walgreens, and neighborhood pharmacies all over the country. Usually $1.50 to $3 a bag. One bag can treat up to 12 batteries. Dissolved in distilled water and introduced into the battery cells, it becomes something the replacement industry never wanted ordinary drivers to understand. Magnesium sulfate acts like a chemical descaler. The magnesium ions compete with the hardened lead sulfate crystals for bonding sites on the plate surface. Over 24 to 36 hours of slow trickle charging, that crystalline layer begins to break apart and dissolve back into the electrolyte. Conductivity returns. The plates regain function. The battery accepts charge. It holds voltage. The engine starts. This is not fringe science. This is electrochemistry that has been understood since the 1860s. Back in 1859, French physicist Gaston Planté built the first lead battery in a laboratory in Paris. And almost from the beginning, the core problem was already visible. Within the first decade of widespread use, European electricians had identified sulfation as the primary failure mechanism and had already begun experimenting with electrolyte additives to reverse it. By the early 1900s, tram operators in Berlin and Vienna were routinely reconditioning fleet batteries with diluted mineral salt solutions instead of throwing money at constant replacements. These methods were documented in German electrical engineering journals that circulated through major universities across Europe. So no, this is not new knowledge. But the truth is, it became inconvenient knowledge. Knowledge that threatened a revenue stream. Then came the war years. In 1943, the United States Army published Field Manual TM1. It served as a technical operations guide for the Signal Corps Division, responsible for communications equipment, radio systems, and portable power in active combat zones. Inside that manual, field electricians were given step-by-step instructions for reconditioning batteries using electrolyte additives available in standard supply kits. And that matters, because armies do not gamble with fantasy. In the middle of the Pacific Theater, they did not have the luxury of waiting for replacement batteries to appear out of nowhere. They needed radios alive. They needed equipment working. They needed chemistry that was cheap, common, and dependable. That manual is declassified. It can still be accessed today through the National Archives. Then, in the 1960s, NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena began developing battery systems for deep space missions. Pioneer, Voyager, missions where power sources had to survive not 5 years, but 50. And when replacement is physically impossible, engineers become brutally honest. They published internal technical reports on electrochemical plate reconditioning as a method for extending service life in environments where there would never be a second chance. Those reports, too, exist in public NASA archives. And what is the pattern? The military saw it. The space program saw it. Remote power systems saw it. Everyone who truly needed batteries to last arrived at the same conclusion. Sulfation is reversible. The materials required to reverse it are cheap, common, effective. So why is the average driver told the opposite? Because the opposite is worth $48 billion a year. The global automotive battery replacement market generates about $48 billion annually. In the United States alone, consumers spend an estimated $14 billion every year on replacement lead-acid batteries. $14 billion built on one belief: the belief that a dead battery cannot be recovered. The belief that sulfation is permanent. The belief that once the engine clicks instead of turning over, your only option is to hand over your card and buy another battery that may have cost the manufacturer less than $30 to build. Run the numbers they never want consumers to run. The average American driver replaces a battery every 3.5 to 5 years. Average replacement cost, including installation, sits around $220. Across a 30-year driving lifetime, that becomes 6 to 8 replacements. Somewhere between $1,320 and $1,760 per driver. Now multiply that across 230 million registered drivers in the United States. That is more than $300 billion in cumulative battery replacement spending across a single generation. And against that tidal wave of spending, a single Epsom salt treatment costs around 37 cents per battery. 37 cents versus $220. That is the equation buried underneath decades of consumer messaging. And the remarkable part is they were not subtle about protecting it. In 1990, Battery Council International, one of the industry's largest trade associations, began circulating consumer guidance that labeled battery reconditioning unreliable, potentially hazardous, and not recommended for ordinary users. They cited sulfuric acid handling. They cited vague voltage irregularities. They cited warranty issues. But really, look at what was missing. Not a single peer-reviewed study proving that magnesium sulfate treatment did not work. Because when serious researchers actually tested sulfation reversal, the data kept pointing in the other direction. That is where the story turns from suspicion into documentation. In 2004, researchers at the Technical University of Graz in Austria carried out a controlled study on lead sulfate dissolution in aged lead-acid batteries. 80 battery units were tested. Half received a magnesium sulfate electrolyte treatment and were then put through controlled charge cycling. The other half remained untreated as the control group. The results were not vague. They were not borderline. The treated batteries recovered an average of 83% of their original rated capacity. Internal resistance, the gold standard measure of battery health, fell by 71% in treated cells. And batteries that had registered zero usable charge returned to stable voltage in less than 36 hours. Then, in 2011, the Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology published a separate study focused on magnesium sulfate treatment for automotive-grade batteries that had sat in storage for 3 years or more without charging. These were batteries that any standard load tester at any parts counter would have labeled beyond recovery. But the outcome told a different story. 62% returned to full functional capacity after a single treatment cycle. 79% reached at least 85% of rated capacity. The researchers also noted that the treatment cost per unit was lower than the price of a single diagnostic charge at a commercial battery service center. And the pattern did not stop there. In 2017, Arizona State University conducted extended life cycle trials on fleet vehicle batteries showing early-stage sulfation. Treated batteries showed a service life extension of 340%. 340%. The university calculated that a municipal fleet with 200 vehicles using this method could eliminate battery replacement costs for at least 6 consecutive years. Every lab, every controlled comparison, every independent data set kept pointing to the same answer. It works. It has worked for a very long time. And that is exactly what makes the next part so revealing. Because once you understand that the chemistry is real, you have to ask a harder question. What happened when people tried to bring it to consumers in a form that could actually threaten the replacement market? In 2001, a small California company called Battery Chem developed a consumer-ready magnesium sulfate battery treatment product. It was packaged, branded, prepared for sale. They even secured distribution agreements with 3 regional auto parts chains. That should have been the moment this old industrial chemistry finally stepped into the mainstream. But it did not happen. Within 18 months, every one of those distribution agreements had been terminated. The public never got a clean explanation, no formal press conference, no dramatic confession, but years later, former employees described what had happened. According to those interviews, the chains were pressured by primary battery suppliers, whose contracts included exclusivity clauses tied to shelf space. The message was brutally simple. If you stock a product that reduces the need for our product, we remove our product from your stores. The chains did the math. They chose $48 billion over a $3 treatment. Battery Chem collapsed. The product disappeared. Then, in 2008, another battery reconditioning product entered the market through early direct-to-consumer internet sales. It began gaining traction, not enough to dominate, but enough to be noticed, enough to become a threat. And within 2 years, 2 of the largest battery manufacturers in North America helped fund a national consumer safety campaign warning about the supposed dangers of aftermarket battery additives. That campaign did not stay quiet. It spread through automotive trade publications. It ran in radio spots across major markets. It was distributed as reference material inside dealership service departments. And this is where the strategy becomes difficult to ignore, because the dangers they cited were not based on consumer-level mineral salt treatments like the ones sold in grocery stores. The studies they leaned on involved industrial sulfuric acid additives at concentrations 10 times higher than anything in a basic magnesium sulfate solution. In other words, they blurred the line on purpose. They took a grocery store mineral salt and grouped it in the public mind with aggressive industrial acid chemistry. They made consumers think the two were the same, and they spent serious money making sure that confusion spread. That is why this story does not feel like a harmless omission. It feels like a revenue defense strategy. And over a lifetime, that strategy has cost ordinary families thousands of dollars. So here is the part they never wanted spoken plainly. Here is the exact method. First, the safety rules matter. Lead acid batteries contain diluted sulfuric acid. During charging, they can release hydrogen gas, so use chemical-resistant gloves. Use safety glasses. Work in a well-ventilated area such as a driveway, an open garage, or an outdoor workspace. Do not smoke. Do not create sparks near an open battery. Respect the chemistry and it will respect you. You need 4 things. A bag of Epsom salt, which is magnesium sulfate, from any pharmacy or grocery store. Distilled water from a supermarket, not tap water. Never tap water because minerals and chlorine can damage the plates. A battery charger with a low amp trickle setting, ideally 2 amps or less. And a voltmeter or digital multimeter, something available at hardware stores or auto parts counters for under $15. Now, the process. Remove the battery from the vehicle. Disconnect the negative terminal first, then the positive. Find the cell caps on the top surface. Standard flooded lead-acid batteries usually have 6 removable caps. Some maintenance-free batteries may have a sealed access strip across the top that can be carefully pried open. But this method does not apply to AGM batteries or gel cell batteries. It is for standard flooded lead-acid batteries only. Next, prepare the solution. Dissolve 1 tablespoon of Epsom salt into 1 cup of warm distilled water. Stir until it becomes fully dissolved and completely clear. Then use a turkey baster, syringe, or pipette to remove a small amount of existing electrolyte from each cell to make room. Add about 1 teaspoon of the Epsom salt solution into each of the 6 cells. Replace the caps. Gently rock the battery side to side 3 or 4 times so the solution spreads evenly across the plates. After that, connect the battery charger on the lowest available amp setting, 2 amps or less. This part is critical. Slow charging gives the magnesium sulfate time to interact with the sulfation layer. Fast charging builds heat and can ruin the process. Let the battery charge for 24 to 36 hours without interruption. Once charging is complete, disconnect the charger and let the battery rest for 2 hours. Then test it with the voltmeter. A healthy, fully recovered 12-volt battery should read between 12.6 and 12.8 volts at rest. If a load tester is available, run a load test to confirm the battery can hold voltage under demand. Then reinstall the battery, reconnecting the positive terminal first and the negative terminal second, and try starting the vehicle. And for heavily degraded batteries, especially batteries that have sat dead for more than 6 months, 1 cycle may not be enough. In those cases, run 2 full treatment cycles. Treat, charge, rest. Test, then repeat. Treat, charge, rest. Test again. Batteries older than 8 to 10 years may not return to a perfect 100% of original capacity. They may come back to 70 or 80% instead. But really, think about what that means. A battery working at 70% when you were ready to replace it for $220 is not a failure. It is money back in your pocket. 1 bag of Epsom salt can treat between 8 and 12 batteries depending on battery size. The numbers speak for themselves. Someone else just paid $240 at a dealership for a battery that may have cost $28 to manufacture. Meanwhile, the same basic chemistry restored yours for less than the price of a pack of gum. And once people discover that, the fear starts to break. And the most striking part of this story is that the people already using this method are not hidden in laboratories. They are not operating inside billion-dollar research facilities. They are ordinary people. The kind of people the battery industry never expected anyone to listen to. There is a man in rural Montana who has kept the same set of deep cycle batteries running on his off-grid solar system for 14 years. Every 18 months, he treats them with Epsom salt. He has never bought a replacement. 14 years. Total battery cost over that entire stretch, less than $40. There is a marine mechanic in the Florida Keys who reconditions boat batteries for local fishermen at $20 per unit. His material cost is 37 cents. He handles around 30 batteries a month. His customers save roughly $200 on each battery, and he built a living out of knowledge the mainstream market tried to bury. There is also a school bus fleet manager in rural Texas who, in 2019, introduced Epsom salt reconditioning across 85 vehicles. Over the next 5 years, that district replaced 0 batteries. 0. The estimated savings reported to the school board exceeded $42,000. These are not fantasy stories. They are not magical exceptions. They are examples of what happens when people step outside the script they were handed. Because really, the official script has always been the same. Battery dies. Battery is declared finished. Consumer pays. Manufacturer wins. And the cycle repeats. But then comes the part that should make any driver stop cold. In 2009, a whistleblower inside one of the 3 largest battery manufacturers in North America reportedly passed an internal memo to a consumer protection watchdog group. According to that memo, the company's own engineering division had known for decades that sulfation-based failure in consumer batteries was chemically reversible using widely available mineral salt solutions. They had studied it, they had evaluated it, and they had rejected bringing any such reconditioning product to market. Why? Because, as the memo was paraphrased, a product that cannot be patented, cannot be controlled, and a solution that costs under $3 cannot sustain a replacement revenue model. That is the line that changes everything. Not danger, not unreliability, not bad science. Revenue model. They did not bury the information because it was too hazardous for the public. They did not suppress it because it failed in testing. They buried it because if ordinary people learned that a huge share of battery failures could be reversed with cheap mineral salt chemistry, the replacement market would take a direct hit. Your dead battery was never just a mechanical inconvenience. To them, it was inventory turnover. It was sales volume. It was predictable profit. That is why every battery you have ever thrown away matters. Every $200 spent at a parts counter. Every moment a mechanic shrugged and said they just do not last anymore. Every time that answer was accepted as inevitable. Because the truth is, none of that was inevitable. The fix existed before you were born. It existed before your parents were born. It was observed by physicists in the 1860s. It was deployed by the Army in the 1940s. It was refined by NASA engineers in the 1960s. It was validated again and again by controlled university testing in the years that followed, and even now, it still costs less than a cup of coffee. The chemistry has not expired. The science has not changed. What changed was public awareness. Or more accurately, what changed was what the public was allowed to hear. And the whole strategy starts to collapse the moment someone takes 1 tablespoon of Epsom salt, dissolves it into 1 cup of distilled water, and sees a battery the market had already written off come back to life. Because at that moment, the mythology breaks. The spell breaks. The customer starts thinking. And once that happens, the industry no longer gets to define the story by itself. That is the real reason this knowledge matters. Not just because it can save 1 battery. Not just because it can save $220. But because every battery reconditioned instead of replaced means money stays in someone's home instead of sliding into a quarterly earnings report. Every person who learns this becomes 1 less automatic sale. Every revived battery is a quiet refusal to keep funding a cycle built on ignorance. So when they tell you a dead battery is done, remember what is actually happening inside it. 6 cells, lead plates, sulfuric acid electrolyte, sulfation forming like scale over the surface. Not always destruction, often obstruction, and obstruction can be reversed. That is the part they never wanted ordinary people repeating to each other. They wanted the process to sound mysterious, dangerous, unreliable, too technical for anyone outside a dealership bay or service center. But in truth, the method is simple. Flooded lead-acid battery, Epsom salt, distilled water, slow trickle charge, 24 to 36 hours. Rest, test, repeat if needed. No miracle, no magic, just chemistry. And really, that may be the most infuriating part of all. The answer was never exotic. It was never hidden in some impossible-to-find industrial lab. It was sitting in the grocery store the whole time, on a bottom shelf, cheap enough to ignore, ordinary enough to overlook, powerful enough to threaten an industry if too many people understood what it could do. Stop and think about how many billions of dollars depend on consumers never making that connection. Then think about how fragile that business model becomes the moment people do. Your dead battery is not automatically dead. In a huge number of cases, it is sulfated. And sulfation, as the record across generations keeps showing, can often be reversed. That is why this story matters. That is why this old knowledge keeps resurfacing. Because once people realize the solution has been cheap, common, and within reach all along, the replacement story stops sounding like necessity and starts sounding like conditioning. So before the next battery goes into the trash, before the next $200 leaves someone's wallet, before the next service counter casually turns chemistry into a sale, remember this. The battery industry's 40-year strategy only works as long as people stay unaware. It only survives as long as dead is accepted without question. The moment that question is asked, the moment the method is tried, the moment a battery comes back instead of being replaced, that strategy loses a little more of its power. If this reached you and made you think differently, pass it on. Let more people see it. Let more people test it. Let more households keep that money instead of surrendering it by default. And if this kind of content is worth hearing, leave a comment, press like, and subscribe in your own way, because the more this spreads...